Hello, my name is Neil Spiritus. I'm with the Manatee Chamber of Commerce, and I'll be your guest moderator today to talk about safety measures on Florida's roadways, specifically about red light cameras, particularly since Florida legislature and then Governor Charlie Crist signed the bill into law in 2010. It is my pleasure to have three instrumental people as guests today. First of all, Melissa Wandall, whose husband Mark was killed as a result of the red light violator and to whom the legislation is named, House Bill 325, the Mark Wandall Safety Act. Also, we have former State Representative Reagan, who is a key sponsor in the Florida House of this particular piece of legislation, and in his last year in the Florida legislature and as Speaker pro tem, he accomplished the goal of passage of this uniform traffic regulation. Lastly, we have State Representative Jim Boy, who observed some of his colleagues trying unsuccessfully to appeal the Mark Wandall Safety Act and key sponsor of PIP insurance this last session, another safety measure to our roadways. Welcome to all of you for being here today. It's my pleasure. First of all, I'd like to go to Melissa for Ronald Reagan to ask us a little bit about House Bill 325. Tell us about that legislation. How long did it actually take to get passed?
Well, I appreciate that, Neil. By the way, thanks. It's an honor and a pleasure to be here with you today. I will say House Bill 325 was a labor of love. And a lot had to do with the fact that Melissa herself got me involved in this during my early period of time of my career in Tallahassee. But the bill itself took 5 years from the first time it was filed until the ultimate passage and ultimately the governor signing it into law. I learned a great deal along the way, I will tell you that. I met some wonderful people along the way. I met and heard some tragic stories along the way as well. But one thing that I was compelled with was the fact that with Melissa's story and with her husband being constituents of mine, living in East County, the fact that I got to know the situation and how potentially with the use of automated enforcement, we can help save lives in the state of Florida. And we know for the fact that it absolutely does work. So, but I tell you, it was 5 years in the running and 5 years of good hard work, but a lot of good people involved, the Senate sponsors, Senator Bennett, a lot of individuals putting their time, energy, and effort to speak on the behalf of this legislation, to help give statistics to my fellow legislators, and also the fact that we were able to educate the legislature, both in the House and the Senate, and ultimately the governor, into signing this piece of legislation that's good for our community and good for the state of Florida. But it took 5 years of perseverance and the fact that we educated our fellow legislators to get it to the point where it now is law in the state of Florida.
Can you tell us a little bit about the law, some of the specifics? I know you've been away from it for a while, but tell us specifically about what happened in 2010 in terms of legislation. Well,
reality is the House Bill 325 with Mark Wandall Traffic Safety Act simply says this. We can't have police officers at every intersection throughout the state of Florida. It is a tool that law enforcement uses to help take care of traffic on our highways and ultimately the safety situation that we have in the state of Florida. But what it basically does is simply this. It says in the event that you run a red light in the state of Florida, instead of a police officer sending you a ticket, instead of having points against your driving record, such as a criminal violation, this would be a civil fine. We basically take a picture of the car, take a picture of the driver's license. Legislatively, we set the program up identical to what we use for people that were to run toll booths at turnpikes in the state of Florida. And that is simply this: the owner of the vehicle is ultimately responsible for their vehicle, regardless of who's in possession of it, and ultimately they are responsible for the actions and activities of that vehicle on the highway in the state of Florida. So should someone run a red light, the owner of the vehicle would receive a citation, approximately $158, and basically be responsible for paying that. But reality is, we know that it saves lives, and I think it's done a tremendous job. And if I might add one other thing, one of the things that I am very, very proud of, in the fact that with Melissa's help, and by the way, in yours, Neil, I forgot to thank you. I thank other people, but you were there for that 5-year struggle and journey as well, and your input helped a great deal. And your speaking with other legislators and senators helped us get to where we are. But I'm so proud of the fact that we put, of every ticket and every citation that's issued in the state of Florida, a certain amount of money goes to trauma centers in the state of Florida and to accident victims for brain and spinal cord injuries. So, and we've raised millions of dollars in the short period of time this law has been in effect. And I'll tell you, if that's a good point. The bad point is that millions of dollars are going there. But reality is, if we'd stop people from running red lights, we might have less use of our trauma centers, less use of our brain and spinal cord injury center.
Well, we're very thankful for your leadership. Couldn't happen without you. And well, Melissa, tell your story a little bit, how you got involved in this whole measure HB 325 and some of the other things you're doing in the way of safety measures.
Sure, thanks, Neil. And as Ron Reagan said, you know, we definitely, this was such collectively, so many of us working on this issue. In October 2003, my husband was killed by a red light runner just a mile from our home, right on State Road 70 in Terra Boulevard. And that moment of him being taken out of our lives so negligently, and knowing that red light running was preventable, knowing that it was a matter of time before it could happen to somebody else. I wanted to find a way to make sure that not only his life went on in a positive way, but to also make sure that we could curb the behaviors of red light running. So for me, it was about trying to find a way to curb those behaviors, not so much penalizing somebody, because once somebody runs a red light and kills somebody, the damage is already done, or once they injure somebody, that damage is already done. So it had to have been something that was going to basically retrain people's brains on how to stop on red again. And I met with Representative Reagan at the time, and he had emailed me. I remember a great email from him, just saying, you know what, I heard about what happened, and if there's anything that I can ever do, please let me know. And it just prompted me to make that call to say, you know what, can you help me with this? Can we find a way? So together, we really sat down and talked about the cameras. And the first thing was for he and I to be educated on them. And Peak Traffic out of Palmetto at the time was Peak Traffic, invited us in to, really research the cameras, to look at the operation, we didn't want to go by hearsay. We wanted to see it for ourselves, to make sure that we were on the path of doing the right thing. So collectively, we made the decision to, rally for a bill that would prevent serious injury and crashes. Because let's face it, we live in a multitasking society where people are driving with their loaded weapons. We are in a very selfish society, and we unfortunately forget at times, we teach our children every day to be respectful, to look at people in the eyes. We tell them, that every step you take, you have to watch out for your fellow man. We're telling them all that, but are we really doing that on our highways? We're not, and it's very dangerous, and people are not coming home again at the end of the day. And when something happens in your life, honestly, it's very simple. You really want to find a way to make sure it doesn't happen to somebody else, and there's so much healing that goes on through that process. So being able to be a part of this journey, and it did take 5 years, to get this bill passed, but it educated us all. I mean, we learned so many great things and brought so many great people on, and you, Neil, and the Chamber were so instrumental in making that happen. So we were able to start the Stop Red Light Running Coalition.
Well, and before we get into that, because I'd like you to talk about some of the groups that you've worked with, because none of us stand alone in this effort. And I'll mention a little bit about the Chamber's activity, because sometimes people ask, well, how is the Chamber involved in an issue such as this? Often we're involved in helping businesses, we help the economy, help in providing more jobs, but how does that mix with? It's actually a quality of life issue with the Chamber. Chamber has been involved in safety issues for many years, livable roadways, whether it's in pedestrian improvements, or if people can't get their goods to market safely, or if they can't get to work safely, that's a real hindrance into our community. So we also were involved with the Skyway Bridge. When the Skyway Bridge dollars were paid off in '03, half of those monies, the proceeds that came back to Manatee County, went to light synchronization, which helps make our roadways, our intersections, hundreds of them now, get traffic through a lot more in a better fashion. But tell us a little bit about, the Stop on Red Coalition and how that or other groups Ron Reagan mentioned the groups that he worked with. There's some others you want to mention that you worked
Well, the Stop Red Light Running Coalition was formed pretty much after Representative Reagan and I had met, and then you and I had met, and then we thought, well, we need to form this coalition so that we can educate people. And the Stop Red Light Running Coalition, our aim is to put safe, educated drivers back on our highways. And of course, with the red light safety cameras, that's what they do. They educate you how to stop on red again, and they make you aware. So along with the Stop Red Light Running Coalition, we've got some great people involved. I know Senator Bennett was very instrumental in being a part of, we really needed to educate Senator Bennett. And the thing that I loved about him is he's very firm in his beliefs, but he took the time to sit down and realize that these cameras were going to, prevent some of these serious crashes and injuries. Senator Altman was the sponsor in the Senate. So he was wonderful. Safe Kids and Safe Kids organization and the community traffic safety teams were very big in being a part of being this collaborative effort that came together to try to get this bill passed. So there's so many groups. It took really a team to get this bill passed and to be able to educate. And we've got some great people like over Captain Mike Fulis over in Orlando. I mean, we reached throughout the state. We had Representative Reagan who would be up there in the legislature and talking to the legislators and getting them to understand. But we had to do our part in the state of Florida also, and getting a lot of the groups involved in what we were doing so that we could come together collectively. Because, like Representative Reagan said, it's an education process.
Absolutely. Well, tell us a little bit about when and why people run red lights. Is there something out there in the water? What is the issue? Are there certain times of the year that they run red lights other than other days?
Yes, there's an organization out of Washington. It's called National Coalition for Safer Roads, and they are National Coalition for Safer Roads. They get their information, and they are funded by the traffic camera companies, and they fund them to give them great information, because most of the camera companies, they actually have the statistics on what's happening. They know what's happening with their cameras out in the states. So they took 18 states and they compiled data on what days people were running red lights. And in 2011, they found that most people run red lights on Friday nights. They found that the highest rate of the biggest day where people are running red lights is Memorial Day, Memorial Day weekend. And I think that you can go on ncsrsafety.org, and I think we are going to have some statistics up also to be able to show people, what to break down those statistics, because it's very interesting as to, number one, people run red lights because they're distracted, because they're speeding. That's what it is. They want to get home. They have places they want to go. They have things they want to see. And again, it gets right back to that selfishness of, I'm looking out for myself. I'm not looking out for anybody else. But in the process of people running red lights, they're injuring the people that are obeying the law.
Sure. Well, we have a big event coming up, the National Republican Convention in Tampa, which I've been told that this has more people coming there than even on Super Bowl. And I did notice the statistics that Super Bowl was even a bigger event than in past years than Memorial Day weekend. Right. So I think that's something for our listeners, our viewers, to be cognizant of when they're out and about on those weekends. We have something that we can talk about in Tallahassee. Representative Boyd, you were there the last few years dealing with this bill and the effort to try to repeal it. Talk about that a little bit. What's happened since Representative Reagan was gone?
Thanks, Neil, and thanks as well for allowing me to be part of the forum today. To me, it's just a no-brainer that we support this and continue to support it. I was with the Chamber Legislative Delegation that went with Melissa and you, Neil, to Tallahassee. At least I went several years. I didn't go every year you went, but
before you were a legislator.
Before I was a legislator, correct, to speak with Representative Reagan and others about the importance of this law. So I kind of had just obviously full and total support of this all the way through and still do. Our first session 2 years ago, two of my colleagues, Representative Corcoran and Trujillo, who are good guys and good representatives, came with the repeal of the red light camera law, which was, I think, House Bill 5957. And it made it all the way through committees. Some of us, of course, voted against it, but it still made it through committees and got to the House floor. And probably in my 2 years in the legislature, it was one of the most spirited debates that I've seen. And it passed on the House floor, the repeal, 59 to 57, after passionate debates on both sides. And Speaker Reagan can probably give you more of the detail than I can on all of those reasons that people want to repeal it. But, you know, I heard privacy and, you know, your personal rights and, you know, all of those types of arguments. But what I remember is the statistics that law enforcement brought to our committees and talked about the lives that it was actually saving, and documented evidence that it was saving lives by having cameras at red light. So to me, that makes the decision pretty easy. But there was a strong and hard fight to repeal it for a variety of reasons, and I don't have any. Let me just back up just a second. It got after it got out of the House, because it did pass the House 5957. It went to the Senate, and as they say, it died in messages in the Senate. They didn't take it up. It got into the system there, and they didn't, for whatever reason, take it up. So then the bill went away. It was brought up again this past year, this last session, I think by Representative Plakin in Orlando, and it didn't get out of committee. I think, as a matter of fact, the committee I sit on, Economic Affairs, it was the final stop. I think he sensed that there wasn't enough support to pass it, so he temporarily postponed or TP'd the bill, which took it out, and it didn't come back up. Sure. I expect it'll probably come back up again. In all truthfulness, I don't, you know, I know there's some that still want to see the law repealed. So what I encourage, while I can be a voice in the Florida House, and our friends in the Senate can be as well, those that are listening, those that are passionate about this, contact your representatives and your senators and tell them the importance of this and what it means to you, what it means to the community to leave this alone. I think that'll have some impact as it comes back up again. I don't know any bill or form number at this point, but I would suspect that based on what I've seen the past 2 years, next year you'll probably see something again attempted to send some sort of repeal to the floor for a vote. And
that's why we bring it back today, so people know that it is still an important issue.
I'd like to add, if you don't mind, and thanks to Representative Boyd's done a fantastic job for our community the last 2 years, and I know there's continued future, he will take care of our community well. But since these cameras have gone into place, the statistics that are being built are remarkable. As Senator Boyd, I promoted you already.
Don't tell Senator Gell.
Yeah, sorry about that. Representative Boyd just stated that the fact that law enforcement, while big supporters all throughout the state, are seeing the statistics that have shown what works, or that these cameras work, I should, in their own communities. And I think hopefully that it could, again, it's part of the continuation of the educational process for communities, community leaders, law enforcement officials, to show that this is a great benefit for our community. And I'm glad to hear that while it took us a long time to get the bill passed, and I understand the passion on people's side who don't support these cameras, but reality is, I think if they continue to get educated, we'll find the definite benefit for their own communities as well as the state of Florida.
I agree with you.
Yeah, and I think also with the ncrssafety.org, if anybody goes to that and wants to see statistics, they have the most amazing statistics, and those statistics are from communities. They're the communities that are putting them together. I was on a red light panel excuse me, last week in Orlando, and St. Pete was talking about their program, and they did a phenomenal job as setting their program up. Number one, they went to the judge and said, okay, we talk on right on red, and that's a lot of things that people don't like. That's one of those things that people are really funny about, because the law says in a prudent manner, careful and prudent manner. But really, when you go right on red, everybody's looking at the car down the road. They're not looking at the bicyclist or the pedestrian in the middle. I mean, in the middle of the walk where your vehicle already is. And Florida's #1 in the nation for pedestrian and bicyclist deaths. But also, St. Pete had said in 6 months, they have cut down on crashes by 64%, and they have cut down on rear end crashes by 62%, just within 6 months. So I think that there's a few myths out there that need to be dispelled, but people are always talking about privacy, and they're always talking about, you're taking away my right. But I really want to challenge people to think that whose right was taken in our family. My husband's rights were wiped away. They were taken away from him in a second because of somebody else's negligence. And that's all we're trying to curb. And if the red light safety cameras will aid our enforcement, and it'll aid our education and aid our engineering of our highways, then that's what works. It's not a one fix. Nothing is a one fix. It's got to be a collaborative effort. And going forward, hopefully, the legislator and the people that are not for these cameras will understand that we don't think that red light safety cameras alone can take care of it, but it's an aid,
right.
You know.
We have to, you know, talking about a passionate issue just here alone, and we're talking really on one side. We can tell how emotional it is and passionate, just as you stated, Representative Boyd.
Well, I was just going to say to the privacy issue, I had a fairly simple argument. It may not have been the best, but it was if you don't run the red light, you have no worries about privacy because it's not going to take your picture. So if you're abiding by the law and doing what you're supposed to do as a prudent motorist, there's no worries or no issues. So, I mean, you're right. I think, Melissa, we need to dispel some of the myths. You know, I heard a lot about the rear end. Oh, it's going to increase rear end traffic accidents. And you probably, Speaker Reagan, probably heard the same thing. Well, statistics now are showing that it actually decreased them. In that case, what did you say, 64%?
64%.
So it's an education, and but please keep educating our body and our members because that's how we can hold it off.
We're sure to share some of those statistics, as Melissa mentioned, later on the show, but go ahead.
I just want to add one final thing to what Representative Boyd said, and Melissa did as well. You know, if you're in a vehicle on a public highway in the state of Florida, there is no expectation of privacy. You have put yourself out there, but there is an expectation that you will obey the laws of the state of Florida. It's very simple. The laws in the state of Florida say you will not run a red light. And whether you're turning right or going straight through it, you will stop at that intersection. So again, these cameras are strictly a tool for law enforcement. It's not the save all and end all, but reality is, you know, there is no expectation of privacy. That shouldn't even be a question or an issue when it comes to red light cameras.
Good points. You know, Representative Boyd, let's come back to this discussion, but you sponsored some important legislation, the PIP insurance issue, and a lot of that was geared toward Florida being #1 in terms of staged accidents that occur, #1 in the whole country, Tampa Bay being high on that list. Talk about that a little bit, and then also how that relates to what we're talking about today on red light cameras. Does that impact the whole issue in terms of accidents, rear end accidents, or red light running?
Sure. Well, thank you. And I'll be brief because it's a long and complicated topic, and you guys don't want to hear all that today, I'm sure. But Florida does lead the nation in PIP, personal injury protection fraud, and in Tampa primarily is the leading community in our state now for the fraud. It is related to red light running, and it is. And staged accidents probably aren't going to be red light runners. They're going to be in off the side of a road or wherever and stage an accident and cause it. But it became $1 billion fraud problem in Florida, and it was costing the people that could afford it the least, costing them the most. The minorities in the Tampa community, Orlando, Pine Hills area, Miami-Dade, single moms were paying $1,500–1,600 a year on a car that all they could provide was coverage that the state mandates they carry to drive a car in Florida. And that, to me, was just unconscionable, while rates are rising 30%, 33, 34% a year. So we had to do something about it. I think in the big picture, it does impact safety on the roads, and it impacts premium prices, as will the good that comes from the red light cameras, lowering accidents, lowering injuries, lowering fatalities. That will drive down insurance premiums over time as well. So all of it's kind of related in the sense that what we're doing, Melissa, what you're doing, Neil, what y'all are doing with this, will save lives, will save injuries, will save accidents, vehicle damage, which over the long period should drive insurance rates down as well. So I think it's all, in that sense, kind of intertwined.
Well, you know, that leads us to the number of actual deaths. 2003, there was 115 deaths from red light running crashes. That's according to Florida Highway Patrol. In 2010, there was 56 due to red light crashes, and that's sources the Florida Department of Transportation. So something's going on there, and I like your feelings on that in terms of what's happening. Is it because legislation? Is it because we've got all these cameras up, voluntarily, involuntarily?
I'd just like to make my own personal comment on that, and I'd like to say it has to do with the fact that not only cameras are in many communities in the state of Florida, but believe it or not, I think people are conscious that there are cameras out there. Whether they're at every intersection or not, I think that they look at it and maybe think that that's the case. If you think about it, though, there's more people living in the state of Florida, more cars on the highway today, and the statistics show that there are less people that have been killed by red light runners. Again, I'd like to attribute it directly to the red light cameras. I think not only the red light cameras, but the education that goes with it as well, I think plays a great deal into it.
Absolutely.
I agree. I think education is huge. I think it's education. I think it's enforcement. I think that, we see our traffic engineers trying to do everything that they can to make our highways safer too, because right now, we look at our roads and it's not, it is absolutely a driver issue, but we look at our roads that we're widening every day. And really, when you look at it, the roads, the skinnier roads, people can't go as fast. With the bigger roads, it's like the Daytona 500 out there. So I think that with that combination of the education, putting up the cameras, I think is number one. We all know that that's curbing that behavior. But I think also it's the education and the resources that we have out there.
Certainly. And we know that people are not driving as much, maybe because of the price of gasoline and there's other issues, but things are on a rebound, but our numbers are going down. Hopefully they'll continue in that direction. Let's talk about some other myths, though. We have a number of myths in terms of rear-end crashes. We've talked a little bit about that and collisions. We've talked about right on red. I know there's some other misconceptions. The affidavits. Some people are concerned about, what happens if my brother's driving the car? Want to talk about that?
Well, go ahead.
I would just mention a couple personal situations. I've had a couple of friends of mine came to me and told me his daughter had gotten a citation by running a red light, and she swore that she didn't do it. She couldn't believe it, and they went and actually took a look at the video, and that's available online to those people that do violate the law, and she took back her statement very quick once she determined that the fact that she did run it and it wasn't in a careful and prudent manner, therefore she did deserve the ticket. We're talking about reality, though. You mentioned earlier some of the myths as far as the affidavit. One of the things about turning my brother in, reality is, if you're a vehicle owner in the state of Florida, you are responsible for that vehicle. Very clearly, Representative Boyd makes sure that in the PIP legislation, the owner of the vehicle is responsible in the event of an accident. It is no different with the utilization of red light cameras, and that is the fact that the owner is ultimately responsible for the actions of that vehicle. He can accept it should a citation come, or we do have the clause with the affidavit that says if you did not and were not driving, if you tell us who was, the citation then will be referred to them. I think that is a great opportunity to move along. And one of the main reasons for that, again, and I'm kind of not getting off course here, but there's companies that own fleets of cars. And the corporation themselves own the vehicle, but yet identify who the driver was at that particular time, and therefore the citation or the violation will go to them. Rear-end collisions, and I'm just going to cite what we did here in Manatee County. We installed a camera on a temporary basis. Neil, I think you'll remember this, Melissa, a few years ago before this became law, just to gather information. And we ran them, I think, for 60 days. And not one, there's 3 intersections, not one rear-end collision occurred. Not one. So we know for the fact that the rear-end collisions occur because of people and drivers not paying attention.
Yeah.
It has nothing to do with the camera. It has nothing to do with people. Supposedly the statement is people will slam on the brakes to prevent themselves from getting a ticket. I don't discount that does occur, but we had no rear-end collisions at all in 60 days when those cameras are there, with the signage there, with people slamming on their brakes. So that is a myth. That's all there is to it.
Well, go ahead.
I was just say one anecdotally, I was talking to a gentleman who's on a board in one of our municipalities that they review these tickets when somebody appeals them. And I don't remember exactly the number, but I want to say it was something like over a course of a couple of years that he was on the board, they reviewed 120 appeals, and 120 of the tickets stuck. So it was like they have evidence, as Representative Reagan said, they have evidence, they have the pictures, they have. It's pretty clear that it's documented that you did what you were suggested that you did. So that myth that they're taking pictures whether you run it or not, I think, is gone, and it's just almost irrefutable evidence in many cases.
You know, the National Coalition for Safer Roads, and we will have the slides up here later, but they do show rear-end crashes are down, actually. Their numbers show Orange County 57% less, Daytona Beach 30, Apopka 21, Orlando actually 15% less. So those numbers, it's interesting because some side will use them on one side of the fence and the others, but we've seen these, we know these statistics are in the 4 cities in Florida. One other issue I might mention is the Pasco County, but Melissa, I don't want to, you were going to say something?
Well, it's very simple. I'm going to bring the simple thing into it. When I was 17 years old, I was too afraid to drive at 16, and I grew up in upstate New York. My parents looked at me when I got my first car and said, if you even think for one moment that you're going to let somebody else drive your vehicle, you are crazy. This car will be taken away from you. You are responsible for anything that happens in your vehicle. We have to take a hard look at ourselves. Just like the rear end crashes, I mean, you're following too closely. It's not, a camera cannot cause all your woes. We cause our own things. So I think it's people just looking back at themselves again and not blaming a system for the way that they drive. And I think that everybody needs to take a good look at that and remember that this is for safety. This is for all of our safety. This is not trying to penalize anybody, but also remember that anytime a new traffic light is put up anywhere, people have to have a certain amount of time to get through that traffic light, and there usually is not signs up where there's signs that say you're about to enter an intersection where you will be photographed, but there's no signs saying, excuse me, we've just put a traffic light up, you need to make sure you stop. Sure. That's when rear-end collisions can occur just the same.
We have the laws, and laws are put in place to deal, not for everybody, but for people who are violating things and for changes. But in some cases, it goes to a higher level. It goes through our court system. Pasco County, for example, had found some unconstitutionality in the law. Talk about the court system. I mean, how important is that in terms of dictating what's going to happen with this legislation?
Well, I'll use St. Pete as an example, only because I heard him talk about this program. They went to the judge first and said, just like the right on red, since that's such a huge issue in the state of Florida, if there's any issues, it's right on red. And they went to the judge first and said, okay, tell us what is a safe and prudent manner. What is it? So now when they ticket right on red, there's no issue. They don't go to the judge because you have your day in court. If you want your day in court, you can look at yourself running the light on a computer. You can have your day in court. They can go to court and the judge can say, you were going 10 miles an hour around there. I'm sorry, you have to have that ticket. So I think that a lot of the communities that are installing the cameras, even though there is a basic statewide law, they still have to, take it into their own hands, go to their judges and say, okay, what are my parameters here, so that we're all working on the same page.
Certainly. I know that there is an effort to regulate that in terms of how slowly, what the speed limit is when they could stop and go over that double bar. So that is an important issue. Right. I know that was one of the final, Mr. Speaker, when you were in the session, that was one of the final things on the floor there that was going back and forth before the bill was finally passed.
And I might add to that, that was one of the hardest pills to swallow for me personally. But reality is that was the ultimate roadblock, I should say, if we had between the House and the Senate when the bill was there, was the right turn on red. And so we inserted the language "careful and prudent manner," and realistically, what we meant to be is, if you want to call it a California stop or whatever, just a roll through right on red. That's primarily what the focus was, not necessarily unwisely issue citations for that. However, we've seen that it does help, it does work. That some people have stopped especially if there's a sign there. It tells them they will be cited, even turning right on red. So, but again, it was just a final thing to get the bill done, to be honest with you. But nonetheless, if it gained enough votes for us to get the ultimate passage, we put that in there.
You know, one of the things also I remember from the report from NSCR, the National Coalition on Safer Roads, was that 96% of people felt that that they might get hit by a red light runner. So people are very concerned about it. And the studies, I remember when you were leader in the House, was the concern. 72%, I believe, you know, wanted some enforcement. They wanted what we ultimately put together. So it's interesting. I mean, I'm going to ask Representative Boyd, as being a legislator, what can people do? But, well, Speaker, did you want to say something?
I just want to add one thing, and I don't want to interrupt Representative Boyd, but when statistics we did for the 5 years that I worked on this bill, every single year we went out, not only in the state of Florida, but nationwide, to gather data on what did people think of these things. Believe it or not, consistently, never, ever, ever was less than 65% of the people that we had talked to said they thought we should have these laws in place, and we should have these cameras, and we should have law enforcement at our intersections, because they were scared as to what could happen to them with red light runners.
Absolutely.
I would just say, you know, I think Melissa hit the nail on the head earlier. It's personal responsibility. You know, we have to take responsibility for our actions. When I became aware of this issue, and primarily because Melissa, of you and Neil and the work that you were doing in Tallahassee, I told my wife and my kids, sit at the intersection and count to 10 before you move, if you're the first car, before you take off. And it is amazing how many people, just by doing that, you'll see go through red lights. Even then, it's cutting down hopefully now because of the law and the lights and the cameras, I mean, but we have to learn as in a society, we are responsible for what we do in our actions, and we have to take responsibility for that, and it's not somebody else's fault that we've done something wrong.
Well, we appreciate your stewardship, because it is, as we all know, a civic responsibility. You know, I'm going to ask Melissa, we have a promo illustrating what we've been talking about here today. You want to tell us a little bit about it? Absolutely.
We have the NCSR, National Coalition for Safer Roads, with the help, actually, we got some footage from METV as well, put together a really great public service announcement. And it's for the good of it's to dispel some myths about, you know, that the fact that these cameras are bringing in so much money and where the money is going. And I think it's really important for people to understand, to take a few minutes and watch the 6-minute video. What it is, it's a video between Mark Bonicatti and myself that talks about where the money goes. $3 per ticket goes to the Miami project, $10 per ticket goes to the trauma centers in the state of Florida. And within 18 months, $2 million has been generated for the Miami project for a cure for paralysis. And they are the #1 project facility, they're the #1 research center in the country for brain and spinal injury.
That's tremendous. Let's take a look at that now.
Across the country, red light running causes crippling injuries and death. Lives forever changed in an instant. Red light safety cameras improve driver behavior, help reduce crashes, and save lives. In Florida, the benefits of red light cameras extend beyond public safety and into the world of cutting-edge science.
I'm so proud to be able to be here to sign this important legislation that will literally help save lives.
May 2010, Florida's then Governor Charlie Crist makes it official, signing the Mark Wandall Traffic Safety Act into law. It caps a 5-year effort led by Mark's widow, Melissa.
This has always been about making sure that Mark's memory lives on, that we make sure that we make a difference for what happened that night, just a quarter of a mile from our home.
Mark Wandall was killed by a red light runner just 2 weeks before Melissa gave birth to their daughter, Madison.
I knew that red light running was preventable. I knew that it was a tragic crash, and I didn't want it to happen to anyone else.
Under the Wandall Safety Act, cities are allowed to install traffic cameras to catch drivers who run red lights. It also calls for a portion of the fines to go to a specific and meaningful purpose. $10 of every fine supports local trauma centers around the state, while another $3 goes here to a world-class research center at the University of Miami called the Miami Project to Cure Paralysis.
Most people don't understand. They think when somebody runs a red light, there's either near misses or everybody's okay. And then you hear about the ones like my husband, Mark, who were killed. But then a lot of times they don't really hear about the people that are injured. The Miami Project is going to be able to help so many of those people.
Inside the 7-story building, more than 200 scientists, researchers, and clinicians work on the latest breakthroughs in spinal cord and brain injuries. From cell therapy to hypothermia, they pioneer efforts to speed recovery from traumatic injuries. They also develop innovative approaches to rehabilitation for improved function. All this takes a lot of money. Science is expensive. The Wandall Safety Act has already provided the Miami Project with $2 million in just 18 months.
To raise $2 million is just amazing.
Melissa Wandall is here to visit the Miami Project for the very first time and to meet its chief fundraiser, Mark Bonaconti.
Hi, Melissa. How are
Hi, Mark.
you?
Good. How are you doing?
Nice to see you.
Nice to see you,
Welcome
too.
to the Miami Project.
Thank you so much.
The Miami Project simply is the most comprehensive spinal cord injury center in the world. And our mission is to find more effective treatments and ultimately a cure for brain and spinal cord injuries and other neurological diseases and disorders.
Mark Bonaconti is the son of Miami Dolphins Hall of Famer Nick Bonaconti. As a boy, Mark dreamed of following in his father's footsteps. He was doing what he loved most when tragedy struck during a college game 26 years ago. Mark's father, Nick, vowed he would do everything he could to help his son walk again, and the Miami Project was born. Over the years, Mark has become the driving force behind fundraising efforts to support both laboratory and clinical research at the center.
Every year, there's 10 to 12,000 injuries in the United States alone, people with spinal cord injuries. And still, by far, the majority of those injuries are caused by automobile accidents. And it's devastating.
Dr. Dalton Dietrich is the Miami Project's chief scientist.
This is a really exciting time in paralysis research. We have been working for over 25 years to understand paralysis, and now we think we have the tools and maybe cell therapies to actually target paralysis and make a difference in people's lives.
So we have 4 floors of laboratories like this.
Okay.
The Miami Project has been working on a new kind of cell therapy, one that could repair and induce regeneration by injecting a person's cells into their own spinal cord.
I've never been more excited in my life about what we're doing, and I've never been more optimistic in a cure.
The money from the Wandall Safety Act is already having a major impact, taking the dream of finding a cure for paralysis one step closer to reality.
This is the difference between, walking next year or walking in 5 years or even later. I mean, every dollar counts, so you can imagine the importance of this money coming into the project.
For Melissa, the visit to the Miami Project is proof positive that the Wandall Safety Act goes far beyond simply saving lives in Florida. The work done here will help millions of people around the world, something that would have made her husband Mark very proud.
There's not a day that goes by that I don't miss my husband and I don't wish that he was here with my daughter and I. But to know on a day like today when we come to the Miami Project, my Mark would just be so overwhelmed by the camaraderie. He loved when people came together to do great things. It would have put a huge smile on his face, and he would have said, "Job well done."
That was very powerful. Thank you, Melissa. Before we close here, I'm going to ask some of our guests to just have a few final comments about what we've been talking about today. It's been an outstanding discussion. And Melissa, if you want to say a few words, any thoughts for our audience?
Yes, I just, I want to say, number one, thanks to each one of you because you've all been so instrumental. Obviously, Ron, you and I have worked together for a long time, and Neil as well. And Representative Boyd, you are our voice up there, and I am so appreciative of all that you're doing. And you did take this on before you even came into legislation. So I want everybody to remember out there that these cameras are for our safety, and just to remember that education, enforcement, the traffic safety, and red light safety cameras do work, and it will bring our family members home at the end of the day. So just take a minute to realize that, get educated on it before you make that decision.
Very good. Speaker.
I would just like to say that if people pay attention and honor what they're supposed to do when they're on the highways, and that is obey the traffic laws in the state of Florida, we probably wouldn't even have this discussion today. But because it doesn't happen, as Melissa mentioned, education, I think that's vital and very important. I think that law enforcement knows, and I hope they continue to use the cameras as an additional tool for traffic safety in the state of Florida. And the fact that while there is money being generated for this, it's going to great causes, as we just saw. And the fact that these things are here to stay, and they will make our roads safer in the state of Florida.
Thank you. You're going to be in Tallahassee, so Representative Boyd, give us your thoughts.
Well, we'll keep up the fight. I can tell you, no one has lived it that I know like Melissa's lived it, and the tragedy that struck her family as a result of just negligence on somebody else's part is just, just almost unimaginable. But we will keep up the fight because it does save lives. Thank you, Melissa and Neil, for your diligence and what you're doing. Speaker Reagan, I know what fight you took on, and I know how hard it was and how long you worked at it, so thank you. And I promise you all, I will do everything I can to continue the fight in Tallahassee. But speak to your, I can't, and Speaker will agree with me, I can't stress enough, speak to your representatives, speak to your senators around the state, tell them how important it is to leave this law alone, leave it intact, and let's save lives.
Absolutely. Before we close here, you want to highlight the website that you mentioned again, where people can learn more about these statistics that we've been sharing today?
Yes,
Melissa?
it's www.ncsrsafety.org.
Very good. It's been my pleasure to be your host today on METV. I want to thank Charles Clapsaddle and all his people here for this presentation. Until we meet again, you can go to themanateechamber.com to see how to get involved in chamber programs and activities, or you can contact me at 941-748-4842 or Neil S. at manateechamber.com. Goodbye.